There is a pattern in history that has caused every democracy, no matter how great, to destroy itself. And right now, in 2025, the United States is following that exact same pattern, stage by stage, decision by decision, almost as if we are reliving the same script that Athens, France, and Turkey once followed before they lost the very soul of freedom. In 430 BC, Athens was the pride of humanity, the center of knowledge, art, and democracy. The people governed themselves, believing that no power could overshadow reason and liberty, but just a century later they became divided, elected demagogues, and brought an end to the world's first democracy with their own hands. In 1789, France rose up under the banner of liberty, equality, fraternity. They demanded justice. They dreamed of a new society. But only a few years later, the guillotine became the symbol of the revolution, and the blood of the people themselves stained the square of freedom red. 2 centuries later, Turkey, the great hope of the modern Islamic world, proved that democracy doesn't need an external enemy to collapse. It only needs citizens fearful enough to elect a strong man and silent enough to watch freedom suffocate in the name of stability. 3 nations, 3 democracies, 3 identical endings, all followed the same 6-stage path, beginning with loss of trust, then radicalization, concentration of power, control of the judiciary and the press, normalization of violence, and finally, constitutional collapse. And what chills us is this: America has already passed through 4 of those 6 stages. We are no longer outside the cycle, no longer approaching it, we are living inside it. This is the story of how democracy dies, why it always believes it is the exception, and why the signs today show that we may be the next democracy to cross the point of no return. And the most terrifying part is it's all happening faster than we think. Democracy is not destroyed by external enemies, it dies from within, when people lose faith in the system they themselves built. When faith collapses, no ammunition or armies are needed, just doubt and fear. Every democracy begins to unravel the moment people stop believing their vote matters, that the law protects them, that truth still exists. And when that faith vanishes, the void is quickly filled by those promising salvation, those who speak the language of fear, of anger, and of a lost, glorious past. They do not break the system, they make it submit. In the name of stability, power is concentrated, dissent is labeled treason, and freedom is gradually replaced by safety. The press is forced to be responsible, courts are reformed, laws are rewritten to legalize the absurd. Democracy never collapses all at once, it drifts away stage by stage, like a tide receding unnoticed, until the sand is bare. And that law, over thousands of years, always unfolds in sequence. The first stage, loss of faith in institutions. People begin to believe all politicians lie, all elections are rigged, and all institutions are corrupt. The second stage, partisan extremism. Disagreement is no longer debate, but battle lines. The third stage, concentration of power. People, tired of chaos, accept a firm hand. The fourth stage, control of media and judiciary, because whoever controls the narrative controls the truth. The fifth stage, normalization of violence, when threats and punishment become the language of politics. And finally, the sixth stage, constitutional collapse, when the democratic system still exists on paper but is dead in practice. That is the law every democracy has endured, from Athens to the modern era. And the most terrifying part is every democracy believes itself immune until the law repeats. 5th century BCE, where the concept of democracy was first born, where people first believed power belonged not to kings but to the people. But it was there that democracy died, not by invading enemies but by the hands of those who created it. After defeating the Persian Empire, Athens entered its golden age. They believed themselves the center of civilization, the light of the ancient world. But victory brought pride, and pride paved the way for division. The aristocracy grew rich from sea trade, while farmers and artisans grew poor, dependent on state subsidies. The first stage of cracking began here, when faith between the people and leaders vanished. The rich saw the commoners as a burden. The poor saw the aristocracy as betrayers of the ideal of freedom. Parliamentary disagreement turned into street hatred. Then came the second stage, partisan extremism. Athenian politics was no longer a place for discussing ideas, but for punishing rivals. Each side saw the other as a threat to the republic's survival. In that atmosphere, demagogues rose. Cleon, the hero of the masses, shouted in the square that he would take Athens back for the people. Alcibiades, young, handsome, eloquent, promised to make Athens greater than ever. They spoke not with reason but with anger. They understood the crowd's discontent and turned it into a tool for power. and the people, tired of division, applauded. The third stage arrived, power concentrated in the hands of those who could incite the crowd. The assembly, once a symbol of free speech, became a tool for revenge. Those criticizing the war were accused of treason. Philosophers, scholars, artists, those who made Athens' soul, were silenced. Truth was replaced by slogans, and fear became the foundation of politics. As the war with Sparta dragged on, Athens began to lose. Finances depleted, faith shattered, and the crowd, once cheering democracy, now demanded discipline and order. The fifth and sixth stages followed so quickly, no one noticed. In desperation, the Athenians elected a dictatorial council, the 30 Tyrants. They thought they were saving the city, but they were burying the first democracy in history alive. When philosophers were executed, including Socrates, Athens was no longer the cradle of freedom. It became history's first lesson that democracy can commit suicide by the people's own will. Athens did not lose to Sparta. They lost to themselves. And like many democracies after, they believed themselves different, that civilization and education would protect them from decay. But the law cares nothing for pride. The law needs only one thing: people forgetting how to use the freedom they fought for. In 1789, Paris erupted. Liberty, equality, fraternity became a call echoing across Europe. For the first time in centuries, people rose against monarchy, believing they could rewrite their own destiny. But just like Athens 2,000 years earlier, the hands raised high for freedom pulled the first rope of the guillotine. The first stage began with absolute loss of faith. The aristocracy lived in luxury. The state drowned in debt, while the poor starved on the streets. Justice was a privilege for the wealthy. The assembly was seen as a puppet. When that faith shattered, the crowd sought not reason but revenge. They believed that by destroying everything old, freedom would emerge on its own. The second stage came quickly: extremism. The new assembly split into two factions: the royalists who wanted to keep the king, the Jacobins who wanted his head. No middle ground, no compromise. If you're not with us, you're the enemy. Debates turned into purges. On the streets, words became ammunition. In the assembly, threats replaced dialogue, and amid the chaos, one name rose: Maximilien Robespierre, the incorruptible. He promised to purify France, to save the revolution from traitors. The third and fourth stages blended, when morality became a weapon and power was wielded in the name of justice. Robespierre seized control of the Committee of Public Safety, controlled the press, passed laws allowing arrests and executions without evidence. Free speech. The pride of the revolution was erased for the nation's good. Every doubting voice was beheaded for the same reason: betraying the fatherland. People no longer fought for freedom, but out of fear of being suspected of not loving it enough. Once blood flowed, the guillotine became the symbol of justice. The fifth stage, violence normalized. In Paris, the blade fell daily in the square before cheering crowds. In the provinces, revolutionary armies executed tens of thousands. Violence became a national ritual. Children were taught that killing enemies was patriotism. Freedom turned into a ghost guarded by fear. And, like every democracy reaching a dead end, France entered the sixth stage: exhaustion. After 10 years of chaos, after hundreds of thousands of lives, the people wanted one thing: order. They no longer needed freedom, they needed peace. And then they welcomed a young soldier named Napoleon Bonaparte. He promised stability, restored national pride, protected the revolution's gains. The crowd applauded. The assembly voted in favor. A republic was replaced by an empire. They killed the king for dictatorship, then crowned a new emperor. France's story is a mirror reflecting the eternal tragedy. Every revolution begins with freedom and ends with control. In the late 1990s, Turkey was drowning in crisis: triple-digit inflation, rampant unemployment, political chaos. The military, self-appointed guardians of the secular republic, repeatedly intervened, toppling civilian governments. Public faith in the system was nearly zero. Amid the rubble, a new face emerged: Recep Tayyip Erdogan, mayor of Istanbul. A man from humble roots who spoke the language the poor understood and promised to restore national pride. In 2002, he won a landslide, becoming a symbol of hope. But as with every story in this law, hope quickly became a tool of power. The first stage repeated: loss of faith in institutions. People believed only Erdogan was strong enough to clean up corruption and end the chaos. The second stage followed: extremism. Society split in two: one side, the children of the people; the other, the anti-national elite. Every election was no longer a policy debate, but a life-or-death battle between two worlds. And in that atmosphere, the third stage began: concentration of power. Erdogan understood that democracy's strength lies in media and law. So he took control of both. Newspapers were bought or shut down. Hundreds of journalists were jailed for insulting the president. The internet was restricted. The remaining outlets were allowed to tell only one story, the government's story. In 2017, the constitution was amended. Turkey shifted from a parliamentary to a presidential system. Legislative, executive, judicial power, all consolidated in one man. The fourth stage was complete. Then the fifth stage unfolded as if preordained. The 2013 Gezi protests, crushed. Thousands arrested in 2016 for allegedly supporting the coup. Social media censored. Academics, civil servants, judges, detained. Political violence became the state's language, legalized under the guise of protecting the homeland. Freedom of speech, assembly, elections, all still existed, but only in name. Ballots were still printed, but outcomes no longer mattered. And so Turkey entered the final stage, democracy reduced to an empty shell, maintaining form to conceal absolute power. When a state can jail a journalist for a sentence, when a citizen can be arrested for sharing a post, democracy is dead. It just hasn't had its funeral announced. Turkey did not lose democracy to a coup. They voted it away. The people, in fear and exhaustion, handed power to the man they believed would save them from chaos, and in return lost the right to resist. Turkey's story is not the exception. It is the mirror of the modern age, where freedom is not taken in blood but given away in silence. Because freedom is rarely stolen. It is usually surrendered in fear and silence. The United States, the symbol of modern democracy, the beacon that once lit the world, is now walking the exact path Athens, France, and Turkey walked. The only difference is that the process unfolds not with guns but with news feeds, meaningless debates, and seemingly harmless clicks. The first stage began quietly, almost unnoticed. Faith in institutions, in the press, elections, and courts began to plummet. Polls showed fewer than 10% of Americans trusted Congress. Nearly half the population doubted election results, and most believed truth depends on the side you choose. When truth becomes subjective, democracy loses its foundation. People no longer trust the system, they trust feelings. And when feelings rule, reason retreats. The second stage came swiftly, partisan extremism. Each side sees the other not as a political opponent, but as an enemy of the nation. The left calls the right a threat to freedom. The right calls the left a danger to identity. The press no longer reports. It stokes emotion. Social media is no longer a place for exchange, but for sowing hatred. The entire country is split into two parallel worlds, where the same event has two truths, two memories, two realities. In that chaos, people grow weary. And like every weary democracy, they turn to the strong man. A leader who says what they want to hear, promises to make America great again, to fight the elite, to represent the real people. That is the start of the third stage, concentration of power, when Congress is paralyzed by division. Executive power swells. The president, regardless of who or which party, increasingly rules by decree rather than law. Congress becomes a stage for speeches rather than decision-making. The rule of law, the pillar of American democracy, begins to wobble when laws are interpreted for political gain. And then we enter the fourth stage, where America stands today. The press is attacked as the enemy of the people. The judiciary is politicized. Judges are judged not by justice but by party. Every Supreme Court ruling is viewed not through a legal lens but through the color of the robe that issued it. Every issue, from climate to education, immigration to healthcare, becomes an ideological battle line. Americans no longer debate to find solutions but to prove the other side wrong. Political violence is rising. Lawmakers threatened, election workers attacked, the Capitol, once a symbol of democratic order, turned into a battlefield on January 6th. Yet instead of uniting to restore faith, both sides only blame each other. Half the country calls it insurrection. The other half calls it patriotism. When violence is justified by loyalty, democracy has one foot in the abyss. If we enter the fifth stage, violence will no longer be the exception. It will become normal politics. No coup needed, no overthrow, just enough people accepting that winning by force is acceptable. And when that happens, the sixth stage is only a matter of time. The Constitution's still on paper, but its soul dead. We do not see democracy die. We see it wear away, feed by feed, accusation by accusation, click by click, widening the divide between Americans. Athens thought they were immune. France thought they were special. Turkey thought they were safe. Now it's our turn, and the law has never been wrong. If the law continues, what lies ahead is no longer debate, but violence. The fifth stage will not arrive with a coup, but with the silent acceptance that political conflict is normal. When threats, attacks, and even politically motivated killings are seen as defending the country, democracy is no longer a space for dialogue, but a battlefield. At this stage, loyalty to party or leader is placed above loyalty to the Constitution. Any action, no matter how illegal or inhumane, can be justified with the word patriotism. Police, military, media, the pillars that must remain neutral begin to be pulled into factions. People carry weapons in public. Speak of civil war as a real possibility. When violence is accepted as a political tool, democracy has lost its soul. And then the sixth stage arrives, constitutional collapse. On paper, everything still exists. Constitution, courts, elections, Congress. But real power has shifted to a small group. Those who control law, media, and public psychology. People still vote, but outcomes are predetermined by the information they're allowed to believe. The press still operates, but it tells only one story. Justice is still spoken of, but only for those on the right side. Democracy then resembles a talking corpse, still calling itself free, while every choice is constrained. History has seen this too many times. Rome lost its republic to Caesar when the people grew too tired of chaos. Weimar lost Germany to Hitler when the people accepted dictatorship to escape crisis. No democracy has survived the sixth stage. None ever. But this law is not fate. It is a warning. Because the one thing history has never denied is people can still stop if they open their eyes before it's too late. History has spoken clearer than any prophecy. Athens, France, Turkey, three democracies thought unconquerable. All self-destructed not by war, not by invasion, but by their own choices. Each nation believed they were different, that intellect, civilization, or faith would shield them from the cruel law of power. But they all followed the same path. Loss of faith, extremism, concentration of power, control, violence, collapse. Not a single bullet killed democracy. Only millions of indifferences and compromises. Democracy does not end in gunfire. It ends amid applause when people clap for things they once swore they would never accept. Every empire falls to ambition. Every democracy dies of fear. And it is that fear, fear of losing safety, fear of difference, fear of loss, that makes people willing to trade freedom for order. But freedom is not an unchanging gift. It is a flame that must be tended. Once that flame dies, no enemy needs to invade. We will burn ourselves in the dark. America today still has a chance. We still have time. If we remember the cost of freedom, if we dare look at ourselves and admit we are no different from Athens, no immune to the law. Every democracy believes itself the exception, until history proves otherwise. But unlike Athens, France, or Turkey, we have one advantage. We know the script in advance. The law is real, but the ending is still ours to choose. And if history has a voice, it whispers only one thing. No one can save a democracy except the people willing to keep it alive. If you believe history is repeating and want to understand where it will lead us, subscribe to join me on this journey. See you in the next part, where past and present meet, and the future can still be rewritten.